there's this weird thing that happens, and I'm sure every single Squiggle holder knows exactly what I'm talking about, where you go from looking at this like just very kind of like simple design and thinking to yourself, wow, I need to go deep here. And then you go deep and you're like, oh my God, there's ghosts and there's bolds and there's hypers and there's fuzzies and there's like all these different attributes that once you, as many of us are, geek out on something like that, and you go down the rabbit hole, you're like, well, I have to own one of these. Like this is going to symbolize the generative art movement. I don't think there's any better NFT in generative art that symbolizes this movement than the Chromie Squiggle.
Welcome to the SquiggleDAO podcast. I'm Jared_Paz, founder of the 8NAP Digital Asset Fund and the generative art platform 8NAP Art, and the unwavering lover of a Chromie Squiggle.
And I'm Nifty. I lead finance, acquisitions, and NFT DeFi for SquiggleDAO, and also another huge fan of Squiggles.
We are here today with an amazing guest, so thank you, Kevin, for being here.
Yeah, it's great to be here. Thanks for having me, guys.
So a little bit about Kevin. That is the CEO of Proof. It's a partner at True Ventures, a VC firm that invests in early stage startups, including SquiggleDAO, disclaimer there. Previously, he founded social news site Dig, the intermittent fasting app Zero, and the meditation app Oak. He also served as the CEO of Hodinky. We'll talk about this later in the episode. He was a general partner at Google Ventures, and he's a really successful angel investor. He was early not only to Twitter and Facebook, but also to Bitcoin and NFTs. And it's an honor to have him with us today. Welcome to the pod, Kevin.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I was also investor in Artblock, so I wanted to have that disclosure as well. So just make sure to get all the disclosures out there so someone can call you out.
Thank you. So you are very deep into health. It's something a space that we are super interested in. You have started 2 health and wellness apps. You work with some of the best doctors in the world. And wanted to ask you, what's the latest hack or gadget that you've incorporated into your routine?
Oh, that's a great one. I would say for me, it's been just a handful of things. One, Peter Attia had a new book that came out recently that's just fantastic. I highly recommend picking that up. Outlive and in the focus on zone 2 cardio in improving your mitochondrial function is undeniable. So for me, it's been, you can probably see over my shoulder here, I have a Peloton. I get on the bike and try and do at least a half hour a day of zone 2 cardio. That's been a big game changer. I've noticed my muscles uptake glucose just so much easier when I've been primed and kind of doing consistent zone 2. So, I see that in when I eat anything that has any fructose in it, or if I go and have a higher carbohydrate meal. I'm wearing a CGM, one of those continuous glucose monitors, so I can really see the difference in just really my body not spiking the way that it would if I was sedentary and had not had that training. So for me, that's probably the latest thing. That also, and just continuing to incorporate a lot of sauna usage, daily meditation. Those are my kind of main staples that I continue to do daily.
How long do you do sauna, and with what frequency?
Sauna, most of the data shows a lot of the benefits happening at the 20-minute mark at around 174. I think it's 174 degrees Fahrenheit. So the sauna that we have in this building here it gets up to around 190, and I do 25 minutes. And so I try to do 5 days a week. I would like to do 6. But it's hard. You're running a startup and doing all the things that you're trying to do. Something has to give, and sauna goes before meditation. So I will miss days of sauna. But the results on in the published papers that Rhonda Patrick has put out, fantastic scientist, really good aggregator of information around high quality published papers. It's undeniable. The reduction in all-cause mortality, cardiovascular improvements, dementia reduction. It's just across the board, just a really healthy thing you can do for your body. And it's just like one of the most relaxing and easy things you can do. I mean, it's like, it's not, your heart rate does get going. Mine will approach 130 or so when I'm in there. I wear a Whoop that can withstand the heat pretty well. so I can actually have that in there. And I sometimes have to cover it with my hand just to cool it down a tiny bit, but it captures my heart rate data the entire time that I'm in there, which is great. And yeah, it's just for me, I put in AirPods and they don't overheat, thankfully. I can't say that will be the case for anyone listening to this. Like, you're not supposed to use them in environments like that, but I just listen to podcasts at the same time. So it's like it's a win-win all around.
So your non-negotiables are meditation, zone 2. Those are the ones that you don't miss?
Yeah, meditation is certainly the most important and the most non-negotiable, but the zone 2 is definitely it's high up on the list. You know, I want to make sure to include that. It's challenging some days because you just have back-to-back meetings. Like today, I'm just like packed until about 4 o'clock, and then kids start jumping into the mix and all of that, and you're like, okay, I'm just gonna bang this out real quick and do a quick 30 minutes. But luckily, it's in the house, so it makes it easy. I think that's the key to a lot of this stuff is how convenient and close to you can you make these things, right? So, I have a gym membership, but I also have some free weights here at the house. So if I just really don't have the time, I can come in and just get involved with the free weights and then still hit those goals.
Yeah, I think makes a difference to have it easy at home, to make your decisions easier. Just pick up the weights or jump into the bike and put the 30 minutes. I'm
Yeah.
thinking a lot about that as well.
Absolutely.
Another question, maybe some people don't know your career as an angel investor. As we were mentioning before, you were a GP at Google Ventures, now at True Ventures, you're a partner. You were early to Twitter, Facebook. You were mining Bitcoin in your computer. You were claiming punks when those were free. So what are some lessons learned? How do you see those opportunities so early?
Yeah, I think it's one of those things where in all of life, you're the sum of like your 5 closest friends, and I have 5 close technology friends, 5 close fitness and wellness friends, and I put them into these different types of buckets. Not that I draw these hard lines between them, because I don't really think of it about that when I'm hanging out or discussing it with them. But I certainly have a handful of technology friends that tend to play at the edges of things, that are always, kicking the tires on any new technology. They're the ones that, are bringing stuff to the surface sooner than I would naturally kind of find it, organically, or by the time it hits Tech Meme or wherever else it's going to be, Hacker News or some of these other sites where these things will appear. So if you can have those types of friends, and you have like an ongoing relationship with them where you just trade back and forth just what's going on. Like I have a WhatsApp group that has, 6 or 7 people in it right now that is just all AI focused, and they're both on the research side and the consumer side. And it's just people that are posting, 2 links a week that are like, this is important, pay attention, right? And so if you could just always have and surround yourself with those people, you'll be naturally just caught up in the flow of things. And then just being a personally curious person myself, like I've always, since I was little, I was building computers on my own and doing all those kind of geeky things, So it just was a natural extension to go and just compile random things and just play with them, and it's fun for me. So it doesn't seem like it's work, and so I end up bumping into these technologies pretty early on, which is great.
Yeah, I mean, you must have a pretty good group of friends, because over the history of your career, you've consistently been early to a number of different things, man. It's been very impressive. I mean, even so much so that, I'm a day one proof pass holder. So, even the foresight to start up an art and NFT focused collective, the foresight on that was amazing. And one of the things that stood out to me, being a proof pass holder, is Grails. It's been the standout to me in my experience. In addition to the community, I think the community is excellent. For the listenership, can you explain what Grails is, and then the origin story behind the concept? Because I'd love to hear kind of like some of what your thought process was behind to get to that point.
Yeah, I think I appreciate you saying having the foresight, but I would modify that a tiny bit and say my wife's one of my wife's complaints about just kind of how I operate generally is I tend to just jump into things without thinking, and so I don't know that for as many like successful startups as I've had, I've also had more failures, right? And that is largely because I'll see something and be like, well, someone should build this, and just go build it, regardless of whether or not, I should probably think it through a little bit more. And then when you're right, you're just really early, and that can sometimes be a detriment depending on how early you are. But it's that is the secret. The secret is not pausing and not slowing down. It's like if you see something, just go for it. It's I remember when I was talking about starting the Proof podcast, it was just like one of those things where I was like, okay, well, these NFTs are starting to take off. I'm just going to create a podcast. And like, I went from the idea to actually launching the show in like 3 days. And it was one of those things where, I was talking to wife and friends and stuff like that. And they're like, Kevin, like, how do you just go, you just go. You just like, there's nothing that stops you from doing these things, which is bit me a few times. But I think that's the key on this is like, if you see an emerging piece of technology and you have an angle or something new and exciting and you want to go explore, like, just don't stop, just jump right in. So that's a key piece. But so that was actually leads us into Grails. I mean, with Grails, it was just like I was sitting around there watching everyone speculate on NFTs, and I was like, well, there's so much great art out here. How can we pay a little bit more attention to the art rather than just the price? And so the idea was just simply to have 25 anonymous artists on there, or 20 anonymous artists on there, and let people choose the art first, and then later reveal who the artists are. And so it's more of a guessing game as to who the artist might be. My ask of the first season of the artist was, hey, is there something you can give me that doesn't fall within your typical domain, so that when people see it, they won't naturally guess it's you, right? So Dmitry Cherniak gave me a piece of photography that he took, and so no one ever guessed that was Dmitry, right? So just is getting, Tyler Hobbs did a really kind of crazy generative piece that was a wall that it was so realistic that people literally thought it was a photograph for like the first like few days, until someone, actually our head of now art, Eli, jumped in and just really zoomed in Photoshop and found out that, saw some artifacts that led him to believe that it was a generative piece. So it was just, I think Grails has always just been this this fun little project that we've done a few seasons of now, and it's always a really exciting time. And this most recent season has been great because it has allowed, even in this market where everything is on fire, it seems like every week, we had more viewership on this season of Grails than we ever have, and people were minting faster than they ever had in the past as well. We changed some of the mechanics a little bit to encourage minting on the sooner side, but it was a great season, and it's been a lot of fun to have that.
I totally love the Grails idea. I really think you were like brilliant with that idea. Also love the protoglyph story with the hidden me bit. That was like amazing. And something that you were saying about trying stuff and lots of successes but lots of failures. I saw the other day a statistic with the biggest number of scorers in the NBA, and next to it the biggest numbers of failures of the NBA, and the names were pretty similar. So you had there on top the usual suspects, but also on the right side, so they are just trying more throws than anyone else. So I think it makes sense what you were saying.
Yeah, I mean, it's always. I guess it was something I learned when I was quite young. I used to watch. I'm a big NBA fan now, but when I was younger, I used to collect baseball cards, and the home run hitters were always the ones that were the so exciting, right? Like whoever could make the most home runs per year as a little kid. It just was a pure, brute strength thing, and this was before all the steroid debacle. I guess it's already starting then, but There was a batter, probably not a ton of people remember, but Jose Canseco, who played for the Oakland Athletics, and he would just strike out every single time. So you kind of knew you're either going to see something amazing and it's just going to be a blast home run, or he's just going to strike out. Like there was no
Yeah,
in
Bash
between.
Brothers, baby.
The
It was
Bash Brothers, yeah, Mark
yeah,
McGuire. And
yeah.
so,
Those two, watching those two play together was
oh my
insane.
God,
You're on the edge of your seat the entire time.
so much fun. It's kind of like the Splash Brothers when the Warriors, like that's the, watching those guys too. So, that's kind of like how I've always felt about startups. It's just like, the biggest risk is just not trying something when you have an idea. So, failure, literally every single startup I've ever had that has failed, I've always walked away with something and said, there's new data that goes back into the memory bank so that next time around I don't repeat those same mistakes, right? So it's really just admitting that you've learned something new. Like if Tess or if Elon stopped the first time a rocket didn't land on a barge in the ocean, like it would just been over a long time ago, right? So it's you just got to embrace that.
Exactly
Yeah,
what they say about all startups fail the first try 90% or 90 something percent, but I guess the second, the third, that's what they are not measuring, and probably the probability keeps decreasing and decreasing as you learn. So yeah, totally agree.
yeah, you got to be in the
Absolutely.
game in order to play it. I mean, I just think it's a matter of when, what I've admired about you and a lot of other builders is you've had almost this like relentless pursuit of creating something. And I think that's kind of especially in this Web3 space, it's something that I'm seeing consistently is there's people who are called to action. And, that action is defined differently, but, as somebody who's, been building for some time, it's something that we're really drawn to you about this. And it's actually probably a perfect segue, but, who or what do you get inspiration from in the crypto space, and really what inspired you to go deep into like the crypto gen art Web3 space? Like
Yeah.
walk us through kind of some of those early days and inspiration.
Yeah. I would say in the earliest days, I remember just thinking about when I was seeing NFTs, because after CryptoPunks minted out, like everyone and CryptoKitties had a little moment. Everyone just forgot about NFTs for, they walked away for a year plus. It was just, but people were continuing to build. Really wasn't aware of that. I was like everyone else where I just like, had my punks in a wallet and just forgot about them and said, oh, that was fun, and moved on to something else. So I think that for me, it was really seeing some artists where I was like, this is a new genre of art that I haven't seen before. That's only possible in the digital realm, like with Glitch, right? And seeing some of Xcopy's work. It was so loud and so in your face. It just jumped out to me as like, oh wow, this is like the Banksy of digital art. Like this is kind of awesome, right? And then someone turned me on to art blocks and said, oh, you got to check out art blocks. And I was trying to mint a Chromie Squiggle. It's like, why can't I mint this? It's like paused. Like what's going on? And I guess they had just paused it. And so I finally got a hold of Snowfro, and Squiggles were not that expensive back then. And he was like, yeah, I can mint you one. And very, very gracious person, as you all know. Like, talk about like just salt of the earth, like amazing human. I don't know that there is any better than Eric. So I would say that seeing that generative art and hearing that story, and then having these artists on the podcast, talking to early Tyler and early Snowfro and some of the others that I had on the podcast, and just seeing that for them, this was a pursuit that they had been doing for many years, but had yet to really monetize it in any way, right? And so, I had living in San Francisco for the majority of my life. I'd walked by some art studios and seen, digital art installations and things like that. But those were very as we know with all things digital, there's they break down over time, right? And so I would always be like, who collects this stuff? Like it's just gonna break, and then if the artist is no longer around, how are you gonna get it repaired? And it was like all this. There's a lot to think about there, and just knowing that things could have and live in perpetuity on the blockchain. And with proven provenance, it was just in known scarcity levels. It just fixed so many issues, and I was like, wow, this is just going to be the way that people collect digital art. Like there's no doubt. And so that's kind of what got me excited, and what made me really jump into it was just understanding that this is not just somebody putting a JPEG on the blockchain. There's a lot more depth here than people will give it credit for.
You've invested in Squiggles, as we said, art blocks as well, SquiggleDAO. What's your thesis behind that?
I remember the first time I saw one, I just thought, okay, these are odd little things, right? And it's one of those types of projects that when you understand historically the significance behind the project, that is like gets you to scratch your head and be like, oh wow, these are interesting for that, and then once you figure out that they can actually animate and the backgrounds can change colors, and there's this weird thing that happens, and I'm sure every single Squiggle holder knows exactly what I'm talking about, where you go from looking at this like just very kind of like simple design and thinking to yourself, wow, I need to go deep here. And then you go deep and you're like, oh my God, there's ghosts and there's bolds and there's hypers and there's fuzzies and there's like all these different attributes that once you, as many of us are, geek out on something like that, and you go down the rabbit hole, you're like, well, I have to own one of these. Like this is going to symbolize the generative art movement. I don't think there's any better NFT in generative art that symbolizes this movement than the Chromie Squiggle. And if you believe that the generative art is here to stay, and it is, I would say, I shouldn't say just generative art, because generative art's been around before the blockchain, so it wouldn't be fair to me to exclude those early pioneers. So I'll say that's important to state. But I would say in terms of blockchain-based generative art, Chromie Squiggle for me, there's the second to none in terms of representing that new movement on the blockchain. So that is, I look at these things and I think to myself, like, someday, call it a few decades from now, when this is just so much larger and we're seeing generative art everywhere. I had a friend of mine, she was telling me that she believes that, our kids will think it was a weird thing that we all wore the same clothing, and that generative art will play a role in creating dynamic, fast fashion, real, like dynamically printed attire for the individual, right? And if it hits in these other sectors and jumps out of the blockchain, as we're starting to see little hints of, and generative everything starts to apply, that is kind of more of Snowfro's vision around some of this stuff, this is just going to go down and be such a very important, significant piece to own as a collector. And I think about these things, and there is blue chip in my mind. The only ones I'd put above Chromie Squiggles would be CryptoPunks. That's the only collection I could say in my mind is more quote unquote blue chip in terms of, if I was putting together a fund. Well, I do have True Ventures. We've obviously invested in the DAO. We also hold our Chromie Squiggles directly at the fund level. So we've bought Chromie Squiggles and held them for our investors, which is great. So we're big believers.
I love that. And as you were saying, you go from something as simple yet recognizable as the Chromie Squiggle. What is that? Then you start digging deep, and you can spend 2 days keep learning new things, or 2 years, as we are, and still be learning new things about the Squiggle. So it's
some of the stuff I'm like, maybe you're stretching it a little bit. They're like, they're like, okay, this is a day one squiggle and it was included in this block number, which is divisible by, you're like, are you taking it too far? Like, it's like, I'm making that up, but you know what I'm talking about, where they're going so deep on the attributes. You're like, not sure if people are going to really care about that one, but it's so funny how people try and pick it apart and figure out new things.
Well, it's cool how to see what people have gravitated towards, right? Like I think somebody just mentioned a reference to like a camel look in one, spaces, and Snowfro latched onto it, and I've heard it come up a couple different times. So I agree with you. It's funny what some people identify with, but at the same time, it's also, I think, the beauty of the algorithm is that people are identifying with it, and it's cool to see, what people have latched onto, and where they get their excitement from.
Yeah. For me personally, I would say that if I'm one of the things I always try to, one of the lenses I always try to think about is like, okay, imagine these are going to exist in a beautiful digital frame a decade from now, right? Like I know frame companies have had their ups and downs, and they're kind of all over the place in terms of, some have gone out of business, and some are just repurposed televisions, and like, but we'll get there, right? We're going to have some great frames at some point. And when that happens, like I always like, I look at all the different ones, and for me, the fuzzies with a black background is just like the depth you get there in terms of just kind of getting lost in the more, when you apply that type of almost like a blur effect to the outer edges. There's just a depth in that particular attribute that I absolutely love when I've seen it on a bigger screen. So I'm a huge fan. I think those are undervalued, to be honest. I
I do
think that
too.
it just like, it's confusing to me. Just because if you haven't already and you're listening to this, I'm sure you have, but if you haven't, do go and animate one on a larger screen with a black background and just really sit back and just take your time and enjoy it, because it's quite beautiful.
Yeah, I have a buddy who's doing like a really deep dive into the algorithm, and he's like of the squiggles, and is like zooming into these like crazy things. It's just the way the circle
Oh
packing
yeah.
happens on the fuzzy is actually, to your point, is it's really next level. The fuzzy is one that I've really dug into to a lot, and it's partially responsible for Nifty and I bonding as much. It's just because with that characteristic of 1,000 step between, which is unique to the fuzzy, it creates a lot of really cool variations that aren't, I'll call it, inherently native to like the normals and whatnot. So fuzzy is definitely one of my favorites.
Yeah, it's so fun. And to your point about the algorithm, I've taken it, and I told Eric this at one point, and I brought it into ChatGPT, and I had it invent a new type that had never been done before. And so it invented new types of outputs that I'd never seen. So it
Are
based
you
it.
able to share? I'm curious to see
Uh,
what their interpretation was.
you can just do it yourself. You have to get the keywords right, but it's like you just basically drop it in and say, hey, make this so it's runnable in a P5JS web editor, and it removes some of the seed stuff that you need to generate the. There's a few things that needs to be modified, but it wasn't. I'm trying to remember if I did this with 3.5 or 4.0 of ChatGPT, because 4.0 would be a hell of a lot better. Um, it wasn't that impressive. It was nothing worth even sharing. I would have posted it online if it was interesting, but it had some weird takes. It didn't quite understand that we see them as kind of more 3D type objects, and so it tried to make it more 2D, and kind of we just lost some things. But I really didn't have time to like sit there and reprompt it and kind of spend a couple hours trying to make a new fuzzy type. So
I'm sure somebody's gonna have some sort of variant on it, and this is gonna inspire somebody to make
yeah,
some
have fun
really
with it.
crazy squiggles. Yeah,
That's
exactly.
that's what's so fun about the fact that he published the whole algorithm out there and made it easy for people to take it and modify it and have fun. So in ChatGPT will, if you're not a JavaScript or P5 a coder, it'll help a lot. So yeah, it's pretty awesome.
Super cool that you went so deep, like even running the algorithm through ChatGPT. That's why we love algorithms such as the Squiggles. And one thing I wanted to ask you, because in my opinion, you have one of the most aesthetically pleasing Squiggle collections. Even the one before the unfortunate hack, I think has some of my favorite pieces in the collection. And wanted to ask you, what do you look for when choosing Squiggles? What's your process?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, I was very fortunate in that after the hack, I had a very nice person reach out to me that was an early collector and had a bunch of squiggles and said, "Hey, I feel bad about your hack. Would you want to purchase some from me? I won't. I mean, he was basically just charging me floor prices, and I got to pick from 100 or so of them or whatever it was, like 200 different ones, and amazing human. And so I went in there and picked out a few of my favorites. I think that the thing for me is I like the chaos of the peaks and valleys, and so you'll notice with a lot of mine, they've very much got tightly dense like squiggle formations. So it's like it's not. I have one that's kind of more spread out, which is it's just beautiful, number 4836. But the others are just like these. I just love watching as they animate, as they kind of quickly jump up and down and do this like rapid heartbeat kind of like vibe as they go through all the different steps there. And it's just like, it's fun to, I don't know, there's something about that I just really love. And then, I picked out one blacked out one with, so that I could go in and, hit spacebar on it and go all the way and step through to a full black background and get it to where it just completely disappears, which is fun because then you just get you guys would know the technical term, but what's the very first dot called? You just call it the
Open
starting,
terminal.
the open terminal?
Open terminal, yeah.
So yeah, so if I go in and I hit space on number 61, it almost completely disappears. I mean, there's just a tiny, tiny, tiny bit that's showing through of the ribbed on that one. But I like that. I like when they seem you're seeing, it's not broken. It's just it is what it is. It was an output that is. That to me is on the rarer side. You don't see a ton of them, and so that is fun. The bold I selected, I just wanted something that was just a solid representation of a bold, and just a good, I think you nailed it when you said I look for the aesthetically pleasing ones. It's like I don't look for a lot of chaos. I like symmetry. I just like a lot of smooth movement. It's just, yeah, I don't, I know how geeky people can get about this in terms of like, all the other little minor attributes that I've heard of from mostly from Derek, who tells me about a lot of the crazy things that people look for, when in these. And for me, I'm much more visual. I just think at the end of the day, like these are ones I'm going to hold for forever. And like, what do I want to have hanging on my wall, right, at some point? And every single one that I have in my collection today, I would say checks that box for me.
It's cool to hear, because I tend to be more on the geeky side, where I'm looking at a lot of the technical data, and I want something that's aesthetically pleasing also, but I definitely was like metadata first, and then it dictates its confirmation with the eye. So it's cool to hear a different perspective.
Yeah,
And with the collection so big, it allows for that to happen, right?
Yeah, it's absolutely true. And then you have to also wonder though that like I'm not sure that something that is hidden and not visual will have as much value. I know perfect spectrums and other things like there's ones that are visually you wouldn't know, and then if someone tells you, oh, this has this attribute that there's only 5 of, right? You'd be like, oh wow. And for me, I don't want to collect something that I have to tell a story around. I just want people to be able to walk up and enjoy it. If I have to say like, no, this isn't a normal Chromie Squiggle. This is one that's worth 20 times as much because of this little hidden attribute. Like that's just like a story I don't want to like have to like flex on when somebody walks into my house. I'd rather them just be able to. So don't get me wrong. Like there's some attributes that I absolutely love that I wish I had. Let's see here. Is it the is it the ribbed? What's the rarest ribbed?
It could be, there is a hyper ribbed. So
I think it's the hyper ribbed that I like the best. And there's, I think that is my all-time favorite.
I think hyper slinky you've mentioned as well.
Maybe
1177.
1177?
Hyper Slinkies are my favorite. I don't know what I got to do, but I'm going to pass one on to my kids come hell or high water. I think it's
you're absolutely
the
right.
most beautiful piece in the collection.
Yes, the hyper Slinky is just so legit. They're when you animate those, like there's nothing better than that. I'm looking at one right now. These are so freaking expensive though, and they never come up for sale. Have you seen one sold recently? I haven't been paying attention, but have many moved lately?
Not recently, but some have moved. And in the DAO, we try to help buyers and sellers. So if you are looking for one, we can try to help.
When you're in the market, just reach out to Nifty.
I appreciate that. That sounds great. Yeah, now you all are you're gonna mess with me here because now you got me looking at all these ones and I'm gonna start getting the bug again to want to buy one. Yeah, see, there's only how many others? 13 hyper slinkies, and I know Derek has a couple, and he just will not part with these things. I know he has at least one, but yeah, these are fantastic. See, but then again, I look at all these and I'm like, okay. There's only a couple that check the aesthetics that I would want in the kind of layout of, because there's a few wonky ones in here. 6108 is amazing. I don't know if you're going to be showing these over video. Ooh, 6323 is legit. Yeah, that one's beautiful. 6323
nice.
is unbelievable. But yeah, you're right. 1177 is also just unbelievably cool. These are so good. They're so good.
They are my favorite as well.
I wish I'm trying to figure out like how I can. There's like some trades I want to do right now, but it's like impossible at the higher end to do some serious trades. It's challenging. Meaning like I have a Fidenza that I absolutely love, but I have another Fidenza that I want that's actually lesser value, but I love it more visually. And so I'm trying to figure out how do I trade that Fidenza and then maybe
black on black?
Yeah, black on black.
That's beautiful.
And then maybe get, one of like then try and go for a hyper slinky or something, or I don't know. It's tough.
We can talk. We can talk.
Fantastic.
So a little bit about, we mentioned in the past that you were the CEO of Hodinky. We are also passionate about watches. Part of my reason why I got into crypto had to do with buying and flipping some Rolexes. And we see, or we think there are a lot of parallels between high-end watches, high-end NFTs, like the provenance, the story behind them, how difficult it is to get one. And what are the similarities and differences that you see when running a high-end NFT company versus a high-end watch company?
There are a lot of similarities in that. It's and you'll see this in in the Grails videos that we do, but it's all about the story, right? Like people have to understand what goes in behind the scenes to actually truly value something at its full worth. I think that you can in the world of watches. You can show off a beautiful watch and people will be drawn to it aesthetically and they may visually think it's a beautiful watch. But when you take that extra step, especially when it comes to the non-mass produced watches, like the ones that are still done by hand, by independent companies, the FB Journes, like the Philippe Dufours, like the folks out there that are still doing it. you look at that and you think to yourself like, wow, like that's a whole nother level of in some sense like a dying craft, right? Like oftentimes when I go to Japan, I'm always trying to kind of seek out some of the more smaller hole in the wall places that have these artisans that are still doing what they've been doing or what their family have been doing for hundreds of years, because that story to me has just always meant so much more. There's like a psychology term where like the charged objects, right? Like plain pair of round glasses are just a pair of glasses that you would sell, at a secondhand store for $10, and then if you find out they were owned by Steve Jobs, they're instantly worth several $100,000. So, like these idea of charged objects is a real thing, right? And objects are charged with stories. And so for me, that's there's a lot of parallels there. Like what we put a lot of time in at Hodinkee and had an editorial team of, call it 10 plus people whose full-time job was to really kind of flesh out and do the storytelling side of the business. So we see one of the most important ways that we can give back to the community at Proof is by kind of taking that playbook and really making sure that we're continuing to tell the stories of NFTs. Like one of the things that you'll see that if you look back at the NFT Daily Show that Sam used to do, he's so or he still does, but he's so data driven. In the early days of that show, and it's a daily show, so there's been a lot of episodes, but in the earliest episodes, it was very much analytics, like, okay, here's what traded, here's what, and it was like almost like a story about how almost like how the stock market was performing, like how many NFTs were changing hands and how many unique wallets were buying them and all of that. And then, we started to really interject some of the art sales into that and say, hey, let's talk about and spend time talking about these important pieces. Yes, you can say the Bored Apes had, $500,000 in volume in a day, but like what's also interesting is what, one of one sold on Super Rare that day from some unknown artist, right? So it's really making sure that every piece of media that we put out there has a little bit of that storytelling element, so that when people think of Proof, they see us as hopefully people that are trying to continue to push forward art in this space, and I think a lot of that is done through media.
Love that, and I see a lot of similarities as we were mentioning, how to present the watches, how to tell the stories. I think that's the key, and we are seeing some watches being tokenized and loans being taken on them.
That.
What do you think of that, real world assets being tokenized and maybe used in NFT DeFi?
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense. I mean, this exists today. Not so much in it does in that you could take a Rolex down to a pawn shop and receive some type of small fraction of what it's worth and have a high interest loan against it. So, I always think that anything that exists in the real world is going to eventually make it and be digitized, and especially on the blockchain, it makes a ton of sense. Some of the things that are disappointing are with royalties going away. It really kind of screws with one particular model, which is one where you could imagine buying something new stock. It could be sneakers, it could be watches, it could be whatever. You don't actually take ownership or possession of that, but it stays locked away in a vault for X number of years. The NFT can trade, 5, 10, 20 different times over. Value can accrue to the NFT. And then at the end of the day, say 20 years from now, someone can say, hey, you know what? I want that Rolex, actually. I want to wear it on my wrist and redeem it and receive it back from the distribution center, or ideally the original manufacturer, right? The problem is that if the manufacturers can't receive dividends, or not dividends, but like, payments on the actual accrual of that value in the form of royalties, there's no incentive to hold that and store it and do all of the logistics around that piece, right? So that was a bummer to have kind of the royalties go away. But that said, I've talked to all the major players out there at this point about royalties, and it's clear to me that there are enough people that care deeply about this that it'll come back in one way or another in some form. So, you know, I've heard a handful of different solutions. There's always workarounds for some of this type of stuff and ways to circumvent it, but I'm optimistic that over the next couple of years it'll get figured out for the right use cases. I don't think we're ever going to go back to a day of just artists making 10% every time something is sold. I think we need to be reasonable with the collectors as well. I think that's part of the reason why we got into this mess is, collectors said, I'm tired of paying this large of chunk, especially if they're down. You can only imagine when a collector is selling at a loss and they're like, wait a second, I'm going to give the artist an additional 7-10%. Like, hell no, right? And I think that's a fair pushback. I would, if I had to guess, royalties will probably be put on the shoulders of the buyer rather than the seller. But we'll see.
Awesome. Well, I wanted to transition to, in the interest of time, a few questions directly about Eric, known as Snowfro. I don't think we can overemphasize the importance of Snowfro for generative art and just the art space in general, especially his connectivity and the project about to release. That's his inclusivity, which I think is something that resonates with everybody on this call. But he's seriously one of a kind. So I guess, is there a specific quality of Snowfro that you found yourself drawn to more than any of the others?
When I first met him, he still had his other business going. Has he talked about his other business publicly, about what he did prior to all this?
Yep. When I interviewed him, it was still about his tile business.
Yeah. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
I didn't want to out him as someone that worked had a tile business if he hadn't already said that. Yeah. So, he had a tile business prior to this. And, I remember Artblocks was really starting to have a moment, like it was starting to take off. And most entrepreneurs would just say, well, screw it, I'm going all in, and just jump in and try and grab the bull by the horns and just go crazy, right? And he was very, very thoughtful and wanting to, make sure that he properly, handed off the business, or, I remember he had a lot of kind of logistical things that he had to figure out there. And it was clear to me that, he's a person that doesn't think in terms of, how can I get a win today or tomorrow, but how can I change the world over the next, decade plus. And those types of entrepreneurs, when you're a venture capitalist or an angel investor, those are the ones that you're really excited to back, because it's those types of people that care so much and are so deeply mission driven that that when the inevitable happens, which is the market collapses, or the entrepreneur's journey is never up and to the right. It hopefully is up and to the right, but there's a whole slew of loop-de-loops and roller coaster rides and everything you need to do to get there. That when those happen, if someone is driven by their mission and not just a quick win, they're there and continuing to build during those times. And I just love that about him. I always respected his thoughtfulness and his ability to kind of see around corners before other people, and just understanding that if this works, it changes everything, right? And on a variety of different fronts, not just generative art that we do on the blockchain, but he was talking to me about generative houses and generative everything. Like this was like over a year ago. Like he had a lot of these ideas that we're just now starting to see some of it trickle out there. And he's just been such an early thought leader in this space. And then you just couple that with the type of human that he is and the generosity that he has. It's rare. It's rare. You don't see someone sitting on hundreds of squiggles worth, tens of millions of dollars that could just have an easy payday and be flying private jets and doing all the craziness. And, you meet him and he's in the same sneakers and jeans that he was 2 years ago. And it's like, there's nothing's changed, and it's a beautiful thing when that happens, because I've seen it go the other way.
Yeah, he's definitely playing for a timeline that's longer than most in this space. I mean, the space is riddled with cash grabs and rugs, and it became evident, as you're indicating to me, that Snowfro was playing for something a lot longer, right? So that's good to see. What do you think that means for what will be Eric's legacy, in your opinion?
Oh man, I think if he plays his cards right, and things continue to trend the way they have, I believe that Eric will go down as one of the modern, taking something that was generative art, and well, really kind of creating the rails and the framework to enable creatives to have an expression of their true selves. And what I mean by that is that, so many people, when I meet the artists that are finally starting to kind of, flip a little bit, flip in terms of like, almost all artists were artists before this, right? As contractors, freelancers, working in production studios, a lot of them have been, getting paid for their work by third parties, or, ad agencies, or you name it. And that's where creatives have typically flocked to. There's something very freeing that I get from these artists in saying, I don't have to do that any longer. And I can now support myself. Like, when you watch Sam Spratt's interviews lately, and like pictures of him and his wife, like, hugging when their like collection is selling out. And you see these moments where these artists say, I'm my own entrepreneur now, and I can explore creatively what I care about most versus what somebody else is telling me to care about. He's going to enable, and has already, probably multiple generations of people to go and have that personal creative expression that they've never had before. And the ability to do that and not have to work for someone else. And that to me is creating a real renaissance of his own, right?
Yeah.
And so that's just like, it's funny. It's like, what will his legacy be? I'd argue he already has one. It's like he's already kickstarted something that I think that, is just gonna, it has its ripple effects all over the place. We've already seen so many other chains and other projects and other people. The generative is like a household word now in the NFT space because of his early work and effort. So it's great to see.
I think the empowerment of the individual in this space, and the reduction of
Yes.
barriers to entry. I mean, being around Proof, the artist Derek, and the support that Proof gave him to see him ascend. Not to just say it's all Proof, he's done a great job, but and Art Blocks has been the same. They're almost like an artist maker. So I agree with you that the legacy will be he's opened up the doors to a lot. Real quick, what's the first word that comes to mind to describe Snowfro for you?
Just kind. I think kind is definitely, and I'll say that with one other additional little sentence or two, which is, I've seen him. I know him well enough now that we've been in a bunch of social situations together, and he's a little mini rock star. I don't think he ever intended that to be the case, and I've seen people just come up to him and to watch him interact with other people. You can tell he's not just putting on a show. It's a real conversation with someone, and that's rare. That's like, it's just like, and it's rare for a variety of reasons. Some people can be overwhelmed. Like, I know some artists that you go up and you have a conversation with them, and it's tough because they're not social people, right? And I think that Snowfro just like has this sense of like, he just kind of puts you at ease, and you feel like you're really talking to the real human. And he's just a kind and caring and compassionate person about the individual that's standing in front of him, which is it's a real treat. And it's why I keep going back to the Art Blocks festivals at Marfa. I love those interactions because he brings in those types of people. Those people are they it's not a mistake, right? Like we're all kind of drawn to that. And when you have a leader that acts and participates and shows up that way, it draws in more people that appreciate that. And I've made, more friends and friendships and had great conversations at in Marfa than probably almost any other conference, right? Like you go to Art Basel and it's like it's chaos and it's money and it's like, it's beautiful. There's a lot of great stuff there. There's a lot of fancy ass parties there, and I've had some great free cocktails, but it's not Marfa, right? And so it's just different, and I love that. I love that vibe. So that's
Yeah,
that's
my
why I love
first
Art
year in
Box.
Marfa was last year, and Nifty's first year is going to be this year. I tell people, if you're going to do one thing, save your shekels for Marfa if you're into generative art at all. There's just something different about it. It's something magical. Not only that, but there's like 500 or 600 people there, so you get, front row access to yourself, to Eric,
Oh my
artists,
God, you can
Tim
just
Ferriss. I mean, it's everybody's willing to talk. I mean, you can
yeah.
talk to Tyler Hobbs. It's the craziest thing to me.
That's the cool thing is like you nailed it. Like you can just walk up to Tyler and just be like, "Hey, one of the greatest generative artists of all time. How are you doing?" Like it's like, these are
How's your night going? Can I
yeah,
buy you a
exactly.
drink?
Yeah.
It's crazy.
It's really crazy. And you get a
Yeah.
cool poster at the end of it. Now I have all hopefully this will be my third poster that'll get framed, and I already have the other two framed, and I just, put them up in different places around the house, and every time I walk by it, I'm like, that was a fun time. Got to do that again.
Yeah, don't let the secret out too much, but yeah, it's
Well,
absolutely
the good
an
news,
amazing
the
thing.
location itself was brilliant because you have to really love generative art to put in that drive, right? So that's
I get surprised when, like, I met people who flew in from Tokyo last year. Nifty's coming from Spain. We were talking before recording about 4 different flights to get there. I mean, I always say you don't end up in Marfa unless you intend to be in Marfa. So there's
right.
almost this like limiting, litmus test just for passion because you have to want to get there.
Absolutely. It's good like that.
It's a good filter. So we have a few more minutes and we have a few rapid fire questions. Answers don't need to be rapid fire. So the first one is, what are you most excited about? Can be Web3, can be outside Web3 right now.
Yeah, I would say right now it's I love every for me there's these moments that happen every 2 to 3 months where I'll see a new mechanic drop in the NFT space where I'm like, that was a good one. Like Sam Spratt when he did the comments on his latest piece and allows all these individual token holders to leave comments on the actual piece that will live with that piece of artwork. It's really cool because if you think about like sometimes I try to like project out like, okay, what does that mean 20, 30, 50, 100 years from now? And it's beautiful, right? Because like if you sat in the Louvre and you could see back historically the comments that people made on specific pieces of artwork over the last 100 years, it's like how amazing would that be, right? Like the Mona Lisa used to be down the hallway when no one even cared. Like what were people saying about it when it was sitting down there, like unguarded, right? It's like it was that to me is just a fun new mechanic. Tyler Hobbs the QQL was a beautiful experiment. I like it when I'm seeing these just things that aren't just basic drops but are more involved. Jack Butcher. I always want to say Jack the Butcher. It just sounds so much like more cooler for some reason. But Jack Butcher, obviously captured a lot of our attention this summer with some of his mechanics, and I think just the programmability of smart contracts in art is just so such early days there. I think that we're going to see a lot of innovation, and for me, that's what I get excited about. Don't get me wrong. There's great one-on-one artists. Anytime Xcopy drops something new, I'm there for it, right? But it's like I also want to. I also like the other dynamics that are getting layered on here.
Totally agree. Any grails that got away and the story behind that?
The one that got away is Xcopy's all-time high in the city, and
Yeah.
It was released in 2018. It's a very early X copy. It is super rare token ID number 11. So only the 11th token to ever be minted on super rare, which is because they do sequential token minting, which is just insane. I was just trying to buy it. The person didn't want to sell it, blah, blah, blah. It was like going back and forth. So the bid history is all here, right? So August 24th, 2021, I put in a 900 ETH offer, was denied. August 25th, the next day, around the same time, I put a 950 ETH offer. And then it sold September 25th for 1,000 ETH, which was $2.9 million. At that time, in August 25th, 950 ETH was worth more than $2.9 million. So it would actually have been a better deal for the seller had they accepted my offer, but they didn't, and it was sold, and I lost it.
And it's now the one that got away.
It's
Holy
the one that
cow.
got away.
By
and
50
it's so
ETH.
freaking good. It's so good.
I was going to say, so close.
So close, but that is the grail of grails that I absolutely love.
So, final question. Can you highlight, we've mentioned the Squiggle almost blacked out, the black on black Fidenza, some X copies, but what would be your highlight from your collection?
Ooh, that is a great question. Let me go real quick here to my collection just to make sure I'm not missing anything. I would say, can I give you two? There's two that are a tie in my book. So there's one called Reach 0.83. It's from 2018. It is a one of one Tyler Hobbs that he minted for me, which is, was a very something I commissioned from him before he really blew up, which he's only done, I think, like 5 or 6, maybe a couple more one of ones. So that to me is just like a grail.
Super
And I
special.
got it printed out in this massive. He sent me a print of it. It was just massive, and I have it hanging up on the wall. And then I'd say the one that I believe has just a lot of historic significance would be the Robbie Barat that I bought on Super Rare, which is, he's a very early AI GAN generative artist. It's called AI Generated Landscape Painting number 2. And so this was from 2018, way back in the day. Token ID number 86, so the sub 100 mint on Super Rare, so one of the very earliest. And it is just it has all of the horrible artifacts of early GAN models, so it looks really muddy and not really, kind of like trees, and you get a little bit of canvas oil painting there, but it's just a representation of that time of what AI was capable of. And for me, I think we'll look back on some of these pieces and say, it'll almost be they'll be cooler because they were horrible AI, and that's the best we could do, right? And so this is one of the first AI NFTs. So that to me is certainly something that I think I have to hold that one for a very long time, because that to me is when people catch on that AI is not going away and that it's going to really be an important part of how we see the creative process going forward, then I think it's going to be a very valuable piece. And Robbie's an interesting character, very, very early. The Lost Robbies is a whole nother story that's worth reading. And then he basically produced AI art for, I think it was like, 8 months or something, and then just checked out and said, I'm never doing NFTs ever again. And then just was gone. So very, very cool to own one of his pieces.
Super interesting story, as we were mentioning before. Kevin, any closing remarks?
No, I just thank you for having me on the show. I mean, I think it's everything that you all are doing around spreading the good word of Crumby Squiggles is so very important, and hope to run into you at Marfa.
Thank you so much. We cannot thank you enough for being here today, for spending your time with us. and discussing your journey. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Kevin. The information provided in this podcast is for general informational purposes only and should not be considered as professional or financial advice. The hosts and guests are not licensed financial advisors, accountants, or lawyers. The content is based on personal experiences, opinions, and research, and its accuracy, completeness, and timeliness cannot be guaranteed.